Mottek on Money continues. This is Frank Mottek. Big week for trade. We saw the ceremonial signing of the Phase 1 U.S.-China trade deal at the White House, and the U.S. Senate joined the House in passing the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement to replace NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. With me now, Gene Seroka, Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles, which, in case you didn't know, is the busiest container port in North America. Gene Seroka, thank you very much for coming to the line, and give us your reaction to the big trade news here, first of all.
Can't happen fast enough, Frank. It's been more than 12 months since the three countries have agreed in principle to the USMCA, and it still has one more hurdle to go through Canadian Parliament. China, having the Phase 1 trade deal in place is good. We have yet to see any text on it from the federal government, but the media reports have shown that we've got quite ambitious plans as a country on exports of agricultural products, energy, machinery, and other individual sectors' products.
So certainly this lifts a lot of uncertainty heading into the new year. How are you gearing up at the Port of Los Angeles for these new trade agreements and their impact?
Like many in the business sector, all we've asked for is certainty, so we can enable our strategies and tactical plans. We still have some work to do in order to get to that area, but we have witnessed 14 declining months in exports. A turnaround is not going to happen with the flip of a lever in this particular case. Imports have migrated to an extent from China to other Southeast Asian nations. Part of that is now moving via the Suez Canal to the U.S. East Coast. So we're missing out on a number of fronts that we've got to really pick up on pretty quickly.
What should the next step be as far as these trade deals are concerned?
Going back to the discussions that have been taking place in the media, the point around a second phase deal with China is getting mixed reviews thus far. Some believe we can jump into the discussions quickly. Others have not seen evidence of that yet. But for the twin ports of LA and Long Beach, more than 50% of our trade is done with China. It's very important for us to get moving on solid ground.
And this past week, you delivered the State of the Port speech. Give us some of the highlights here.
Record numbers. We've just begun our 2040 planning purposes on both digital and physical infrastructure. Also, the need to reinvent ourselves. If import cargo is going to be moving, as we've talked about, we need to really pick up the work that we're doing on the export side of the business. That, along with our plans to decarbonize the port, as you and I have talked before, by the year 2030, zero emissions marine terminal equipment, and 2035 will bring us to a goal of zero emissions heavy-duty trucks. Much work to do with industry on that, but I like the traction and the support we're getting from the Los Angeles port community. And
generally speaking, what's the buzz on the economy and business as we head into the new year?
Still some of the indicators that I've been talking about publicly. U.S.-listed companies are holding more cash than ever, in excess of $2.2 trillion on balance sheets. That money needs to be deployed in CapEx and talent. Consumer spending, still pretty strong. Housing starts and employment numbers continue to report up. The economy driven by folks like you and me at the store and on the internet will continue.
Anything else on the horizon at the Port of L.A. for 2020? And will this be a record year? What's the estimate there?
We don't know. Because of the uncertainty on our trade policies, Frank, we're going to try to hold on to what we have and grow in sectors that will be enabled by these trade deals. We see this as a new normal, and we're going to have to remain nimble and resilient to adapt to this new changing policy. On other business, we're going to be putting shovels in the ground at our new San Pedro public market and the Wilmington waterfront promenade for visitor serving purposes. Equally as exciting, the cruise ships will continue to increase in number of calls and size, so we'll be bringing more passengers into the Port of Los Angeles.
Gene Seroka, Director of the Port of Los Angeles, thank you very much for wrapping up a big week, and we wish you all the best in 2020.
Thank you, Frank.
The U.S. Senate vote approving the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement came a day after President Trump signed the long-awaited Phase 1 trade deal with China, and shortly before the Senate formally began the impeachment trial of the president. The new USMCA trade deal is intended to replace the 26-year-old North American Free Trade Agreement and includes tougher rules on labor and automotive content. Now, the new trade deal passed the Senate on an 89-10 bipartisan vote, sending the measure on to President Trump for him to sign into law. And that could happen, by the way, in the week ahead. The president made renegotiating NAFTA a priority, calling NAFTA the worst trade deal ever made. The Democratic-controlled House passed the USMCA legislation last month after hammering out some changes to ensure better enforcement of labor rights and tighter environmental rules. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said the president's efforts to rebalance U.S. ties with its major trading partners were bearing fruit now and boosted U.S. economic growth. Mexico's president called the deal's approval good news for the Mexican economy and predicted it would jumpstart new investments. And as L.A. Port Director Gene Seroka noted a few moments ago, Canada still needs to approve the deal before it can take effect and replace NAFTA. Canada's parliament does not return to session until January 27th. Various industry groups have been cheering the trade deal and said it would provide more certainty to revive investment flows.